Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Van Hemert from RDU on Stage, and I am here with Mike Anthony, who I am so excited to chat with because I feel like I know you. I've spent the last 2 days reading your book, Life at Hamilton, and we're going to talk all about it. I can't wait. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And I'm not a reader. So, guys, when I tell you this is an easy read, it's a fun read, you get a little bit of insight on your favorite celebrities. This is a good one. Um, and it's funny, I didn't tear up at the book until the very end. You gave this beautiful testimony to your mom. I'm very close to my mom. Your mom's a nurse, sister is a nurse. So before we get into all the Hamilton stuff, how's your family of first responders faring through this crazy COVID crisis?
They're doing well. Thanks for asking. Yeah, my mom is retired now. My sister just got her second booster shot of the vaccine on Sunday. And she is doing very well. She had a little soreness in the arm, a little tiredness. Other than that, totally fine. So yeah, they've survived through it. And yes, I mean, it's been such a difficult road for so many people on the front lines of this thing. They're having like a whole different experience from a lot of others seeing this thing up close every day. So yes, thanks to all of the people on the front lines of this thing.
It's so wonderful. I know, I've been doing these pandemic live chats since theaters closed because I really just wanted to see my friends. I missed seeing all my friends in the lobbies of shows. And so I was like, hey, hop on a live chat and we'll chat. And a few of them, I've spoken to people in New York right around 7 o'clock or 7:30, and you can hear out their windows people clapping for the first responders, and it's so amazing. So I love the testimony to your mom. It just made me smile, and it did make me. I was like, damn it, I made it through the book without crying. I got through the Make-A-Wish kids. I got through everything, and here we are. He mentions his mom, and I'm a mess. So I love one thing you say in the book. You mentioned so many teachers in the book. So thank God for the amazing theater educators. And you actually said in the book, I quoted, if you ask most successful people how they got to where they are, how they found themselves doing what they love, chances are beyond mentioning their parents, the story will start, well, there was a teacher. And you mentioned that because Lin-Manuel Miranda was on one of the morning talk shows and they brought in his 8th grade teacher. And so that's where that quote comes from. But you talk about your high school drama teacher, Miss Sowney.
Sowney, yep, Pat Sowney.
And how nobody left her class without having an appreciation for theater. So how did she... What lessons did she impart to you about theater truly to give you an appreciation for shows like In the Heights and Hamilton?
Yeah, Pat was it was high school, early high school, so we were young teenagers, but Pat treated us like we were full-fledged adults. To her credit. And there was this one particular day, I had recently gotten involved in the theater program because as I describe in the book, I'd been a very, very shy child. But I, through this, crazy turn of events, I ended up being involved in theater in high school. But there was this one day I was up on stage with a friend of mine. I won't mention his name, but he knows who he is. And we went off script during rehearsal. I'm sorry, it wasn't even during rehearsal. It was during a performance. something had happened during this one act play. And then we started to improvise, and we're making these jokes, and the audience is loving it. Our friends on stage are loving it. And so we were loving it. We were feeding off of this laughter, and we kept on going. And we come off stage thinking, oh my God, we just had the night of our lives. We'll never be that on again. It was incredible. We were like so in sync. And Pat came backstage, and I'm sure she remembers this, and had us like basically up against a wall, and gave us this lecture about why what we had just done was not what we thought it was. She, theater in Pat's eyes and in my eyes now, especially certainly, is this sacred kind of a thing that changes what the world is. I talk a lot in the book about how people don't get better because we say, hey, you should be better. That rarely works. What makes us better is being around better. I think, like the vibrations of better start to rub off on us, and it raises our own, I think. And theater is one of the things that teaches us by doing it without letting us know that it's happening. I equate it to there's the known story about a frog who gets boiled alive because the temperature is getting raised slowly by degrees, and he doesn't realize it until he dies from this. And I think that's how people get good and get better, and how societies evolve. It happens slowly, so slowly that we don't even notice that it's necessarily happening until we look back and see that we've come a distance. And of course, we've got a long way to go, as we all know, but we've definitely come a distance. And theater is one of those things that advances us. And so that makes it sacred. And it's not something we're doing for ourselves. It's something we're doing for each other. And Pat, that day, that's what she was so upset about. Like, my friend and I were up there for ourselves in that moment. We were getting this joy out of making people laugh, but it wasn't what the show was about. We had lost the show. We'd lost the meaning of what the play was and what the playwright's intentions were. And we were not in service to the play and to the audience at that point. We were up there in service of ourselves, having a great time, making people laugh. Because, oh my gosh, we're so funny, rather than telling the story and doing the play and letting the play do what the author intended it to do, to slowly raise people's vibrations in that way. So, it was a lesson that I'll never forget. And of course, I love improv now, but there's a place for that. And Pat taught us all about it. And that was not the place for that at that moment. So yeah, Pat is, a wonderful woman. She still lives in Guilford, Connecticut, where I grew up. Still having an impact on young people. Just a real, she's one of the people that totally altered my stream. She was a big pebble in my stream and sent me in a brand new, beautiful direction. So thank you, Pat. And thanks to all teachers.
Yes, thank you, Pat. Thank you to all the teachers, and especially the teachers now who have had to pivot it and teach online. I can't thank teachers enough. So just to kind of give people a little bit of background, you have worked at the Richard Rodgers Theater at the bar for a long time. How did you get the gig, which has now turned out to be the coolest gig in the world? But how did you get the gig?
Yeah, I took the job. I had moved to New York to be an actor, and I had done a play. I did 12th Night with a small company in the city. And as it turned out, most of the people in the show worked for a company called Sandbar Concessions that provides the bar services for the Nederlander theaters on Broadway. So we have 9 theaters on Broadway. And at that time I had been temping, doing just kind of soul sucking, stuffing envelopes all day in like window computerless rooms type of work. And at the end of that run, they said, "Hey, would you like to try bartending with us in a theater?" And I was like, "Are you kidding? Yes! Oh my God!" Even though I had never bartended before in my life. So I took that job, thinking that it would be this perfect short-term way to make money until my acting career took off to the places I was sure it was going. And then, yes, 14 years later, I'm still working at that bar. And that's not a sad thing. As you note, it ended up being blessed. I'm blessed to do what I do.
I was going to say the takeaway from the book for me was the gratitude you feel. And I want to talk about that in a little bit, because I think that's so important for people, because oftentimes you have a dream and a path and you think you're going in one direction. You say a little prayer and hope for that to happen. And it does happen, just not in the way that you think it's going to.
Right.
So I love that from the book, but I have to talk about the other book for a minute. And we're gonna, once we start talking about Hamilton, we're never gonna stop. So we're gonna get to Hamilton, but this is very important. You wrote another book. It's going to be a documentary, Love, Dad, about an afterlife experience you had with your dad. So a few months ago, I had a paranormal investigator with me on this program.
Oh.
And we were talking about haunted theaters. And she mentioned that the Richard Rodgers Theater is said to be haunted.
Yeah.
You have spent 14 years of your life there. So give us the scoop. Is it haunted?
Yeah, I've heard from many people that it's haunted. I have never personally had an experience there, but maybe just a couple of months before we got closed down, a guy that I work with, his name is Joseph, he was closing down the theater one night. So he's the last person left. Literally, he's alone in the Richard Rodgers Theater all by himself, which that alone scares the pants off of me, that thought. So then picture this. He's coming off stage. All of the lights have been turned off. He just turned off the lights backstage. So there's just the ghost light left on stage, right? He comes down into the house. He's on the left side of the house. And from the middle of the orchestra seats, a scream happens. According to Joseph, a blood-curdling scream happens. And which obviously, he's this big, tough dude, but not in that moment. I mean, he ran. He ran out of, he quickly shined his light. There's no one there. He's totally alone. And he ran out of the theater. And there are a lot of people who've had less frightening stories than that. Rosie, who is another friend of mine who works there, she's often there cleaning up the theater after hours, and she has seen what she thinks is a woman, I believe, walking up in the back of the orchestra, kind of back and forth, and she appears to be a friendly spirit. So Rosie just acknowledges her and then goes back to her duties and tries not to get involved. But yeah, there are a lot of stories of things going on in theaters, and which is not a surprise, I guess. If this is true, then we survive. So much passion, so much life has happened in theaters. It'd be a good place to hang out, I should think.
I would guess. And, you do talk about meeting Teresa Caputo in the book. So, maybe she has to come back and or John Edwards or somebody has to go to the Richard Rodgers and kind of uncover what's happening there.
At least take care of the screaming person. Let's at least figure out what that one is about.
So thank you for indulging me. And I really, now that I've read this book, really do want to dive into the next one, because I know it seems like you come from a very close family. Your sister emailed me, which was so sweet. And I'd be interested in reading the second book, but I did have to ask you that about the Richard Rodgers.
I'll just say that, after my dad passed, I had experiences that simply you can't explain in the current scientific paradigm. You just can't. Before I became an actor, I had initially gone to college to be a science teacher. I've always loved science, and I was going to be a high school science teacher. And what happened in my life, that's detailed in that book, science just does not have answers for right now. And I'm involved in a show on Netflix that's on right now called Surviving Death. That is a 6-part series that looks into some of the evidence suggesting that we are much more than our bodies. And I
Ooh, okay. So guys, everyone keeps asking me what to watch on Netflix. now you've got something. 6 parts, Surviving Death. So we're all done with Tiger King and Schitt's Creek. We're all looking for something else to watch. So let's talk about the book. And really, I think the book really should be called Life with Lynn, because you give such a wonderful homage to him. But you really have had a front row seat to history twice. First, for a little known show called In the Heights. Talk to me about those early days at the Richard Rodgers Theater, watching rehearsals for In the Heights with what you affectionately call the cup guy, who ends up being Lin-Manuel Miranda.
I'll tell you, like Lynn now, if he writes an email, he signs it Cup Guy. If he sends me an email, it's signed.
Awesome.
It's signed Cup Guy. Yeah. Because when I first met Lynn, the very first day that I met him, I had no idea who he was. In the Heights hadn't opened yet. It was the day before the first preview that I met him. And so I was just behind the bar cleaning the bar, and this guy comes up and he asks me if we have any of the show cups, because we had just started doing the souvenir cups with the show's logo. And I was like, yeah, we don't have them yet. We'll have them soon. Do you work here? And he said, yeah, I'm with the show. That was all that he said. I'm with the show. Humble Lynn. And I was like, okay, sure. Yeah. Then, so I'm thinking he must be a stagehand or something. So I asked him to come back in a few weeks when we have the cups. And then that night I walked into the theater to watch the last run through of the show, and the lights come up and there's the guy, the cup guy standing on the stage under the spotlight. And, so I picked up a playbill, and that's how I learned that Lin-Manuel Miranda is not only in the show, he wrote the show, he conceived it, and that he's a genius. That's what I very quickly learned, that he is an actual legitimate genius.
He seems not only like a genius, though, but just from the way you describe him in the book, he really just seems like a genuine person. And in one part of the book, you said, with all the fame, with all the accolades that he's now gotten with Hamilton and within the Heights, but since Hamilton became the juggernaut that it is, that he's really just the same old cup guy that walked into the theater that you described.
Yeah, I mean, with you would think with as you said, In the Heights itself, in my opinion, is just a masterpiece. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that alone, if that's all he had ever put into the world, that's a masterpiece. But with Hamilton, he was shot obviously into the stratosphere of fame in a way that Broadway rarely transcends into the zeitgeist the way that Hamilton did. And yeah, he even with all of that adulation, constant adulation, can only imagine how large my head would be if I had done something like that and had this constant praise coming at me. But he stayed exactly the same. And like I said, I've worked on Broadway for 14 years now. So I've seen so many shows come and go. And no one that I've met has set up a feeling in the theater the way Lynn has. I mean, he really does make it feel like you are a part of the show, no matter what you're doing. You are a part of the experience that he's creating in that theater. So even if you're just bartending. The day after the Tonys, after Hamilton won, the 11 Tonys or whatever it was, he came in with his 2 personal Tonys and set them down on the bar. And he said, here, I just wanted to bring this in case you guys wanted to take pictures with him. So he leaves me with his Tonys and he goes out so that all of the house staff can take photos with the Tonys. No one's ever done that. No one has ever done that in the 14 years that I'd been working on Broadway. So he really is a genuine guy. He's a very, he's got a huge heart, as you can see. Lin, he's a crier. Lin is Lin, that clip, and I am too. I relate to Lin on this, but that clip where his teacher, when he's on that morning show and he's surprised with the message from his teacher, Lin starts weeping. Because that's, he's a sensitive guy. He's got a big, which you have to be to write the sort of stuff that he writes. You've got to be an amazingly sensitive, empathetic person. And that's what he is. So not only a brain that's a once in a lifetime kind of a brain, he's also got a huge heart.
Yes, and you can see that in the work that he puts out in the world. You spend a lot of time, you talk about in the book, observing him. You joke in one on one page about giving him notes to the song Moana as he's holding his Tony, and I wonder what, watching him through In the Heights, through Hamilton, watching him work, seeing the evolution of those shows, seeing him perform in both those shows, what did you learn from observing him about the creative process?
I learned that he is in a league I will never come close to. I learned that, I tell this story in the book. There was this day when, during In the Heights, before, again, most people knew who Lin was, or that he had, been involved in Freestyle Love Supreme, and the sound system went down just before the curtain was supposed to go up. So, we're now like 15 minutes past curtain time and the audience is getting restless. And Lin comes out on stage. And he starts to chat with some audience members, just what's your name? Where are you from? What did you have for breakfast today? These the small talk stuff. And then he did that with maybe 5 or 7 people. He then went on to do this 15-minute rap, improvised rap, using all of that information that he just gathered. And it was extraordinary. I couldn't, my brain was trying to figure out how this was happening, what I was seeing. It was... when I say that he's a genius, I really mean that his brain just works in a way that the average brain doesn't. He's able to, in the moment, he can be saying one fantastically funny, creative thing, while back there, his brain is somehow coming up with the next funny and creative thing. That also rhymes with the first thing. Come on, Lin. It also has to rhyme. It's amazing. And the show never went on that night, by the way. The show, they couldn't get the technical issue figured out, but people left feeling like there was this buzz in the audience as they left that night. So, and another story I tell of getting to watch him up close is he was going over this line. I forget which line it was, but there was something about this one line in Hamilton that he wasn't happy with. And he was, because they were rehearsing in the lobby that day in front of the bar. And he just said this line over and over again, like different rhythms, using slightly different words, slightly different cadence, until he hit until it hit him the way that he wanted it to. And that was really fascinating to watch. Like I say in the book, it felt like I was watching like Shakespeare write, or like, Michelangelo sculpt David. But the other thing that's important to say about Lin is that, and he says this himself, and Hamilton, the man, Alexander Hamilton, said this too, that what can come off as genius is often the result of an unbelievable amount of work. And Lin would work on a couplet, he says, sometimes for weeks, just 2 lines, until it became what it ended up being.
Mhm.
So the creative process, it looks easy by the end, right? Hamilton happens and it just all happens, but it didn't just all happen. That took an unbelievable, almost unfathomable amount of work to make that come together. So yeah, the creative process is different for every human being, and it can be different for the same person on different days. Excuse me. Lynn wrote Dear Theodosia, I believe it was, like in a one night. He like wrote it the night before. He came in the next day. He did it, and Tommy was like, "That's it. That's the song." Like that. So that came like that. So yeah, it was watching him, being able to see him up close, really a special perspective.
And so many other amazing artists too. You talk about Christopher Jackson, who's just his voice and his rendition of One Last Time with President Obama. Every time I see it, tears me up. I'm a crier, but every time I hear that song, it tears me up.
Yeah, I don't know how when Chris did One Last Time, the last time, I think I tell this story in the book too, that I was a mess watching that, because the meta, I don't know how Chris got through it, and he gave just absolutely, I mean, he always does, obviously, but that night there was even an extra something behind that song, and it just bowled me over, and I came out and I'm like crying, and there's this like little girl asking for like soda, and I'm like, I'm sorry, 1 minute. I mean, yeah, he was, and also a fantastically nice guy as well.
One thing I'm curious about, and I'm always curious about this on Broadway, because when I was a kid and we went to shows, you went to a show, you left a show. There were no meet and greets and stage doors. Nobody even knew where the stage door was. Now there's barricades and guards for shows like Hamilton. But, from the beginning of In the Heights, when nobody knew what this was, to the opening night of Hamilton, where people had an inkling that this was going to be something amazingly special. How did you see the fandom change? You normally go out the front door, but there were a couple times you went out the stage door. So how did you see the fandom change?
Yeah. At the beginning, I equate it to the closest thing I can remember in my perspective was Rent. I remember when I was in high school, like friends would go down on like a Friday night after school, sleep on the sidewalk, to try to get the lottery tickets for the Saturday matinee performance. So there was this small, very dedicated fan base. And I think In the Heights was sort of that way. People who saw the show became totally enamored of it. And I noticed right away that we were getting repeat visitors. That's how a show has something happening, when you have people who are coming more than once. And that was happening within the Heights. People were coming back again and again and again. But Hamilton went way beyond the, what you might call, I guess, the average Broadway audience. This totally broke through barriers, and you found people at the show. I tell this story in the book about these football players who came to the show that said that they had, I jokingly said, because they were unbelievable masses of humanity, like 6'8", enormous guys. And I jokingly said, "Oh my God, did you guys meet on a football team?" And they said, "Actually, yeah, we played D1 Division I football for whatever school." And they said, "Our girlfriends dragged us here to the show." And it was like, they were there to do this favor to their girlfriend. So they were at the bar getting drinks just to help them get through this nightmare of having to sit through a Broadway show. And then one of those guys came back after the first act, and his eyes were pink. And I was like, "Oh, how's the show?" And he said, dude. And that's all he said. He said 3 dudes. And I was like, I get it. He was totally blown away. And that might have been his first time ever seeing a musical. As far as I could tell from the limited interaction we had, you know, musical theater was definitely not this guy's cup of tea, so to speak. And so that's the kind of thing that Hamilton I've seen do up close. And the fan base became, you know, when Lynn started doing the Ham for Ham shows, 46th Street had to be closed down eventually, basically, because the crowd was so enormous. People were coming just to watch this 5, 10, 15-minute little skit that was going on before the show. You know, I've never seen anything like it. But what you're talking about there, I usually leave through the front door and I avoid the stage door where the crowds had gathered. And by this point in the run, there were huge crowds. People would leave before the curtain call so they could run out and be first in line at the stations. And that day I had been late for some reason and I was backstage. So I ended up leaving through the stage door, completely forgetting that there was a crowd out there. And I open up the door and there's this huge applause and the cameras are flashing and and it was this moment that was embarrassing for me and for them, as I could tell they were quickly, I could hear the progression. They were like, oh my God, that's who, wait a minute. Is that, who is that? Is that guy? Is that? No, he's nobody. He's nobody. But for a split second, I knew what it must feel like to have that sort of love thrown at you. But yeah, it was a fandom unlike anything that I had personally experienced before on Broadway.
It's really interesting. My son, when he graduated high school, all he wanted for graduation was to see Hamilton. So we took him to New York for a long weekend and got tickets to see it. And the stage door was crazy. All I remember about the Richard Rodgers Theater is how steep it was, because I kept feeling like I was just going to fall over rows and rows of people heading to my seat. And the craziness, because my son was one of those people who left the show right as the show was over so he could be in line to get the autographs. And the cast had just changed over, so it was not Lynn, it wasn't the original Broadway cast, but they were fantastic. And I said to my husband that night, I said, very rarely does the show live up to the hype, but this one totally does. You tell so many stories in the book about celebrities. So if you have a favorite celebrity and they went to Hamilton, Mike probably wrote about them. But my favorite stories in the book are about the people who aren't famous, from the kids to the Make-A-Wish kids to the kids whose dream has been to go to Broadway and see this show, and now they're there. The one story that made me chuckle, Hamilton came here to Raleigh, the tour, and my mother goes to all the shows with me to see, and I review shows here, but my dad really doesn't like shows, but he loves history. And he asked me if we could go see Hamilton. So I was like, okay, well, I'll figure out how to get tickets to see Hamilton at DPAC. And we went. And we couldn't sit together because we couldn't get seats together. So at intermission, I went to him and I said, Dad, how do you like it? And he said, I forgot my hearing aid. I can't hear anything.
Oh.
And you had this 80-year-old man who came to the bar who told you the same thing. I was rolling on the floor. I was like, that could have been my dad, because that was my dad in Hamilton. I can't hear. I don't know what they're saying. Do you have a favorite non-celebrity moment that sticks out? A person who came to the bar that you just fondly remember?
I mean, my favorites, all of my favorite stories are the non-celebrity stories. I mean, the celebrity ones are fun and everything. And, you know, it's neat. It's been neat to meet people that that I grew up watching on television and stuff. But my favorite stories are by far just the things that I would see on a daily basis. I mean, some of my favorites that are in the book. There's one that I think about a lot. These two kids came in, probably like 5 and 7, maybe something like that. I'm terrible with knowing how old children are. They were like this old, whatever that is. And
that old.
the little girl, it was a brother and a sister, and the sister, who was the older one, was teasing her brother and said, he started crying. Like, to me, she said, he started crying as soon as we got in here. He started crying. And the little boy said, yeah, I did start crying, and I am not embarrassed about it. My heart is bursting right now. And it was like the sweetest thing. This little dude whose heart was bursting because he was at Hamilton, right? So we talked for a while, and then they leave. And the little girl lets her family get ahead of her. And then she comes back to the bar. Her head is barely over the bar. And she says to me, I just want you to know, my heart is actually bursting too. And then she walks away. And it was like the sweetest, the effect that the show has had on especially younger people has been so uplifting to me, because theater struggles in Broadway's doing great, but theater in general struggles. There are so many entertainment options, and now everyone has a television on their in their pocket, basically. And especially, I do regional theater. I do a lot of like Shakespeare at small theaters, and the age gets older and older and older, and it's really hard to get young people in. So to see young people being so affected, to have their little hearts bursting at a show, at a piece of theater, live theater, is really just gives me a lot of hope.
It does to me too. It's funny. I was sent to review the show Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the show is not very good. The book is really good. The movie's good. The show, not so much. But there was a little boy behind me, and he giggled through the whole thing. Yeah. And at intermission, he said to his mother, is there more? Is there more? Can I see more? And I put down my pen because, I'm copiously taking notes and going to tear this play apart. And I put down my pen, and my whole review was basically, well done, Willy Wonka. Well done. Because this kid just couldn't wait to go back to the theater. And I was like, okay, if that's what it takes, I'm a believer. I was like,
right. I guess sometimes I guess that's enough, right? And sometimes
it's enough. Yeah. It's enough. Well, and you see shows like The Lightning Thief, or now there are a lot of shows that have this kind of fandom, this young fandom, but it really does warm me to see young people at the theater, because it gives me hope that theater will be alive and well. and
that's so important. Because stuff happens at a live theater event that does not happen anywhere else. I really do believe there is something important about people being together in the same physical space, laughing and crying and going through this experience together. It does something to us, I believe, as human beings, and it's theater has been happening for as long as far back as recorded history goes, right? The people have been doing theater, and there's got to be an important reason for that. I write in the book a little bit at the end about an experiment done at the City College London, where they went to a performance of Dreamgirls in the West End, and they were monitoring the electrodermal activity of some of the audience members, and to their astonishment, they have no explanation for this, they found that the people's hearts started to beat coherently. So for some reason, during the first act, sitting there experiencing that together caused their hearts to literally beat together. Then intermission happens, and the effect dissipated. The second act goes on, and again, their hearts start to beat in time. And science cannot explain that. They're, according to mainstream materialist science, there is no physical connection between human beings. There is no reason whatsoever our hearts should be. There's no reason. And yet theater has that effect. And I don't know what that means, but it's got to mean something. And I feel like it's important in some way. So yeah, to see live theater thriving in that way, especially with young people, Hamilton has created lifelong theater fans. It's really something special.
I I I have to admit, so I told you I'm not much of a reader. Most days I would rather have a root canal than read a book. So I tell my friends, I'm like, it's not that I can't read. I can read. I just don't have any patience to read. But your book, I literally was hoping you would talk about one specific event. And I was like, well, I'm gonna get to the event, because so I kept reading and reading and reading, and I was like, I hope he gets to it. I hope he gets to it.
Oh, I hope I did. Did I?
You did.
Okay.
It's the night that Mike Pence came to see Hamilton.
Yeah, yes.
Can you talk to me? I mean, you're talking about live theater, how there's nothing like it. Can you talk to me about that night? Mike Pence came in very soon after the election, and the response, did the response and the fallout afterwards surprise you at all?
Well, it was certainly, first of all, I want to say that I think I'm going to put that on the title for the next edition of the book. I'll put that on the cover. Slightly better than a root canal. I think.
Yes, it's much better than a root canal. Read the book. I'm telling you, if I could read it, anybody could read it, because I'd have to, if I made it to page 300 or whatever it was, you're gonna
love that. Yeah, the night that Mike Pence came was the most. It ended up being the most. Sorry, it's my cat back there. It ended up being the most electrifying night of theater by far that I've ever experienced. Was I surprised? I mean, I was surprised that he was there in a sense. When we heard he was coming, I was like, well, does Mike Pence, is this like a joke? Is someone playing a joke on him? Why? Obviously everyone knows that had been an extraordinarily tense presidential campaign, during which the president elects, whose name I will leave out.
We know who he is.
You know who he is. One of the pillars of his campaign was speaking of immigrants as the other in some way, vilifying immigrants, making people afraid of immigrants, even though this is a country of immigrants, which is what Hamilton is about. So given that, and everyone knew what Hamilton was, it was surprising that Mike Pence was coming. Yeah. The story that I tell in the book, and this is where the book came from. I happened to share a brief few sentences about an interaction that I had with Mike Pence, and it went viral. It got shared on Pantsuit Nation, which was a Hillary Clinton Facebook group that had millions of people. So it just went viral, this little post. But when he came, we were all sort of, everyone that I work with, I won't say everyone, most of the people that I work with are lean to the left, and were devastated by the results of the election. I mean, I think it's fair. I think devastated is not an exaggeration. And I think we were grieving. When I look at it now, I actually feel like there was a grieving process that was going on. And I'm a straight white guy. So what it was like for people who are not straight white men, obviously I can't know. And Jeffrey Seller, who's the lead producer of Hamilton, he's on record saying, I think to the Times maybe, that the Hamilton family was reeling after the election. So that's the psychological place that we were in, because this is only 10 days later that Mike Pence is there at the front door of Hamilton. So we're still very much in the midst of trying to deal with this, the fact that we had just elected a person who had done and said things that to our minds were an enormous step backwards. I'll put it that way. And also, as you might know, working in theater, I happen to work amongst a large number of people who do not identify as heterosexual, and Mike Pence has very strong views about homosexuality, right? He sees homosexuality as an abomination because of his so that's what he believes. And the day that he came, I happened to be standing between two people who are gay, a man and a woman, and one of them is a good friend of mine. I've known her for many, many years. And while the Secret Service was doing the final sweep inside their final checks or whatever, there were like 8 of us standing in the lobby, and the silence was incredibly uncomfortable because Mike Pence is right here. He's flanked by 2 Secret Service people. He's right there. And you can tell he's like trying to find a friendly face, and my friend Christine, who doesn't mind that I use her name. She's in the book and everything. She started weeping. She was in the moment just overcome. She didn't realize how hard it was going to be that close to somebody who has the beliefs that he has. And so anyway, the all clear is given, and he starts to make his way into the house, and he's coming up to us. So Christine is weeping. The guy beside me has his hands folded, his arms folded, and he's like looking at the ground. And I think Mike Pence thought maybe that I was the best chance he had at finding someone who was likely to be friendly with him, I guess, if not a supporter of his. And, in that moment, which I write about, it was hard for me. I'm a generally friendly person, and, and I want people to feel good, and I want people to be happy. And in that moment, Mike Pence, he's smiling at me. And in that moment, he's a human being, right? And we all have things we've all done things, we all think things, we all have things about us that we're not proud of, things that we need to work on, right? And that could be what life is all about, here to work out that stuff. And Mike Pence has that stuff. It doesn't make him an evil person, right, necessarily. And in that moment, all of these things I know about him and how he's affected people that I love through his beliefs, because Mike Pence has gone as far as, like, when he was the governor of Indiana, diverting money from AIDS research into programs that literally try to use electroshock therapy to make people not have feelings for people. They try to shock the gay out of people, basically, right? Which science has concluded unquestionably that does not work. It's a ludicrous notion. It doesn't work. So that's the level of his. He doesn't just have these beliefs. He's also tried to, it's also really truly affected people's lives, and the number of AIDS cases went up over that time. So it's really affected people's lives. So anyway, in that moment, as he's coming up to me, he's like going to shake my hand, and I had my arms folded too, and I realized I happened to be wearing the pin. Lynn, not long before that, the terrible tragedy at the Pulse nightclub happened, right? The day of, I think it was the morning or the night before the Tony Awards. So Lynn wrote this now famous sonnet, right? This beautiful sonnet, yes. The most memorable part of which is love is love is love is love is love. And those words were printed on a pin that they'd made for the house staff. And I happened to be wearing that. And so as Mike came up to me, instead of shaking his hand, I just pointed to the pin because again, she's crying here. But in that moment, I couldn't shake his hand, right, for her, and he looked at it, and I don't know if he knew what that meant or what, but he knew that I was not on board anyway. And anyway, then he goes into the house, and I ran around the other way because I was very curious to know what the reaction was going to be like from the audience. We'd been asked all night, what's going on? Why is there so much security? Because Secret Service is everywhere, but for obvious reasons, we were not allowed to say who it was that was there. So then when Mike Pence entered, the house lights were still up, and suddenly everyone sees him, and they realize why there's such heightened security. And, a couple of people clapped, and then that was drowned out in a response of boos. And of course the cast knew that he was there, obviously. And right from the beginning of the show, the audience collectively decided that they were going to use their every single response to every line as a rebuke to the president-elect's positions. It was very clear that they were talking to Mike Pence, sending a message to him that they hoped would get back to the president-elect, right? Because most of the inflammatory rhetoric came from the president-elect, And it was just, it's impossible to explain. I mean, it gives me chills still when I think about this. The meta aspects of all of this, like, it's a show about the birth of democracy in America, right? It's the story of the birth of American democracy. While a couple of 100 years later, American democracy is being tested in a way that a lot of us felt it had not been tested in a long time. And so the meta aspects of that were mind-blowing. But, for instance, the line, "Immigrants, we get the job done," the response was so loud and extended. I mean, I've never been more proud to live in New York City than in that moment. Like they couldn't go on. The actors had to like pause. It was so loud. You couldn't even like hear the orchestra anymore. It was astounding, and the whole night was like that. And then at the end, of course, a little speech that Lynn and Jeffrey had written got read from the stage, a very respectful speech. Of course, that all got twisted by the president-elect, but it was a very respectful speech, which, to his credit, Mike Pence stopped and listened to. So it wasn't him that flamed the anger of the supporters of the president-elect. It was the president-elect through his Twitter account, which I think, isn't it so nice to not have to worry about the what's happening on Twitter every day? But yeah, it was a night that's difficult to explain. I hope I do it justice in the book, but it was a powerful, theater and art. Like I say in the book, it usually takes time for the effect to be fully have its impact. But on that night, art was making a difference in real time. It was happening in real time, and it was really indescribable and powerful and uplifting. Also, at the same time that it was a scary time, it was really a special, a unique and powerful night.
I can only imagine, and having watched the news reports and the Twitter situation with the president, like I said, I was so hoping you would write about it in the book, and you really did. And everything that you write about in the book is not only relatable, but really beautiful and uplifting. And it makes you feel like maybe the world's going to be okay. And so that's the other thing I really liked about this book. You talked about one of the teachers building a ladder or lending a ladder. I was like, okay, that's what this book is doing. It is lending me a ladder right now.
Oh.
But I told you at the beginning of this, one thing I did take away from the book was this tremendous gratitude that I feel like you have for this theater, this company, this cast, everyone from Lynn to Fran, the bathroom person, to your friends at the bar.
Right.
But it was, I also feel like it didn't start out that way. That you're an actor. Here are these people up on the stage living your dream every single night. And so at what point do you move from, wow, they're there and I'm here, to, maybe it's enough. Like, to quote the Eliza song, maybe that would be enough. So at what point do you get to that place of gratitude? How do you find that catharsis?
I think it happened, over time. I don't know that there was like an aha moment where, like, eureka, I figured this out. Yeah, like I said before, we all have these dreams and hopes, and life doesn't necessarily go the way that you think it's going to go. And in my case, yeah, I was so close to what I had hoped to be doing. It was right there in front of me every day. But I realized, I had to face the fact that I just don't have it. I don't have the abilities to do what these people that I was watching every day do. My vocal apparatus is not set up to make the kinds of sounds that are not painful for people to listen to. My body does not move in the way it needs to move. And I had to come to terms with that. And of course, that's hard to realize that you might not have what it takes to do whatever you want to do, like your mom told you could do. But yeah, the most important thing that I learned from this experience, I remember listening one night to, look around. And it struck me one night in particular, how lucky we are to be alive right now. Now, like you said, we've had Make-A-Wish kids come in, right? They're given, they might not survive the medical battle they're going through, and they're given a wish to do whatever they want in the world almost. And they've decided to come to Hamilton. So that was certainly a powerful thing. And we've had multiple Make-A-Wish kids come. So, that'll slap you upside the head, for sure. But look around. I mean, I was at Hamilton every day, which, in the middle of all of the chaos happening in the country, it was like this bubble that I was in of hope and creativity and joy and love. It was something that very few people had the chance to do, and I was doing it. So that realization, dawned on me, and then I realized, it's been said by religious teachers for thousands of years, right? Zen Buddhists have been saying that the secret to happiness, the key to happiness, is being in the moment, just living for right now. And that's what I started to do. I started to really just pay attention to the moment and really taking it in, what was happening. And I started sharing those moments on Facebook, at first just to friends and family. And then they got shared. And that happened simply because I was paying attention. There's nothing special about my ability to perceive goodness in the world. It just turns out there is a lot of goodness in the world. There truly is. There's a lot of stuff we have to work on, of course, obviously. I don't mean to minimize any of that, but there is also a lot of beauty in this world. And I was starting to pay attention to it and see it, and sharing those stories. And the most important lesson, if I had to boil it down for me, is that I learned that though you may not be able to do whatever it is you thought you wanted to do, you can always find new things that light you up. You can always find new things that you do want to do. There isn't just one thing out there necessarily that's going to bring happiness. So you just got to keep looking. You just got to keep looking until you find the thing that gets you out of bed and turns you on. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I love that so much. And I'm sorry, my family, this is real life. My family is in the other room banging dishes, so I had to mute my mic. um, I love that you said that. And that was really my takeaway from the book, is that, it reminded me of that scene in Under the Tuscan Sun, where at the end she's looking around and she's like, yeah, I wanted a big house with children running around and friends, and I have all that. It's just not my children, and it's not exactly the way I envisioned it, but yeah, it all happened. So
That's right. Yeah.
um toward the end of the book, and this is a very new release because this is one of the few books about theater that goes up to the time of COVID so far that I've read. You do talk about COVID. You compare um, COVID to a sick day, which I kind of love. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to let you buy the book and see what he says about the sick day, and the global impact of this. But you also talk about the day that theaters reopen. It's been said that Hamilton might open in July of this year, July 4th. What do you imagine that opening night is going to be like?
I could cry right now thinking about it. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like. I think July 4th is probably not going to. I mean, my instinct is that, unfortunately, I think it'll be probably later in the fall. But when it does happen, it's going to be. I mean, opening night had been the most extraordinary night, maybe, or the Mike Pence night. That is going to be superseded by us being together again in a theater. I mean, really, I don't even know that I'm going to be able to handle it. I don't know how the actors will be able to handle it, the emotion of it. It reminds me a little bit of thinking about after 9/11, my girlfriend and I were walking around Times Square, and it was literally a few days later. I don't like 3-4 days or something. But when Broadway opened back up again, but of course it was a ghost town. There was no one there. And producers were literally standing on the sidewalk, handing out tickets to people who were walking by, literally handing out free tickets. And we had been walking by Les Mis. So like 3 days after 9/11 or whatever it was, the first night that theater opened up again, we're sitting in the front row with not a big audience, maybe a few hundred people, very small, watching Les Mis. And at the end, they're all standing in the line, singing, the finale, and they're all weeping right up on stage. They're weeping. We're all completely weeping because Les Mis, do you hear the people say, like it all took on this much greater, obviously meta meaning. And I remember thinking in that night, as an actor, I don't think I could get through this. And I feel similar about how it's going to be on the first night back. It's going to be just a party like the likes of which it's hard to imagine, to all be together again like that in that way. And I think the important thing that I'm trying to take away from all of this is that, as divided as it can seem, especially when we see things like what happened at the Capitol and all of this, I really do honestly believe, though, that's the exception, and that there is much more about being a human being that connects us than that makes us different. We all love our kids in the same way, right? We all feel love. The important things about being a human are universal, and it gets all distorted, and things get distorted through the human brain. But if you can get the brain out of it a little bit and go down here more, the core things about being human, we all have. And theater is one of the things that touches here often, more so than here, and that's why it brings us together, I think, and why maybe hearts are literally beating in time, because there's something, it's touching those universal parts of us,
Mm.
that go way beyond the divisions that we create and start to believe in so strongly that we literally start carrying guns and storming the Capitol and all of that. Those are things we've made up in our brains largely. The real true stuff is the stuff that connects us, and that's what theater, I think, touches on. So yeah, I cannot wait to be back. It's going to be an unbelievable experience.
Well, like you, I really do feel like theater is my sanctuary. It's my safe space. It's where I go to work out the world's problems. So I do feel like I just can't wait to have that experience again. And maybe even to return to the Richard Rodgers Theater if I can ever get a ticket again, but and see Hamilton. But this has been delightful. And the book is really such an enjoyable read and such an uplifting read. It's not just about the celebrity sightings. It's really about finding kindness and gratitude. And that's what I love so much about it. So thank you for hanging out with me tonight and giving us this beautiful book to satiate us until we can get back to theater.
It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you can do the pull quote. Better than a root canal. Absolutely, 100%. Read the book. If I can read it, I'm telling you, my friend is actually a writer. She's going to kill me for saying this, but she actually has written about 16 books. And when she started writing these books, I was like, please just tell me I don't have to read them. I will write you like a review on Amazon, but please tell me I don't have to read them. Now that I actually do interviews, though, I actually have to read them. So I did enjoy this book so much. I hope to read the next one. Maybe when theater opens again, you can do a little ghost hunting expedition at the Richard Rodgers.
That would be fun. That would be fun. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. Visit Mike's website. You can find out about both books, mikeanthony.com. The books are also available on Amazon. The documentary is on Netflix. Is that what you said?
Surviving Death is on Netflix. Yeah.
Surviving Death is on Netflix. And just stay safe and healthy so we can see you soon at the theater. Everyone, come back Friday night. We're taking a field trip. We're going to go to Pittsburgh and learn about the Pittsburgh Youth Theater, talking about regional theater. We're doing field trip Fridays and checking out some regional theaters in our area. So come back Friday night at 7:30 for that. Thank you, Mike. I so appreciate you. And just take care. Stay healthy.
I appreciate you. Same to you. Thanks so much.